California is very close to doing something important. It's about to become the first state in the United States to make a rule that says people can't treat each other unfairly because of their caste, which is like a social group people are born into. To help explain why this is happening, I talked with Mugdha. We wanted to find out why more and more people think it's a good idea to have rules against this kind of unfairness, even if it's something that comes from the different part of the world. At the same time, we also looked at the opinion of some people who believe that making these rules might have unintended bad results. My name is Ankur, and you are listening to the News Park.
Despite dating back over several thousand years old, caste systems, human trafficking, workplace bullying and harassment, gender-based violence, rape and...
Hi Ankur, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Good as well. So Ankur, if you could provide us some information about this new law. It was just approved by California's government, which is mostly made of Democrats.
Right.
And now it's waiting for approval from the state's Democratic governor, Gavin Newsom.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
So just wanted to know your thoughts on this.
Okay, so the legislation in question is known as Senate Bill 403 or SB 403 for short. In simple terms, SB 403 aims to ban caste-based discrimination throughout California.
Okay.
This means that discrimination based on caste will be prohibited in various aspects of life, including housing and employment. And caste will be treated as a protected characteristic, similar to how gender, sex, sexual orientation are protected.
Okay.
In other words, people won't be allowed to discriminate against each other based on their caste.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Sure. So you've provided your thoughts on it. So I just wanted to clarify the concept of caste.
Mm-hmm.
While many of us have a general idea of its meaning, it's just helpful to have a clear explanation for people who might not know about it.
Right. It's not a native
Universal
yeah,
thing.
exactly.
It's not, yeah.
So the caste system, one of the world's oldest system of social hierarchy, originated in India thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
And is deeply tied to Hinduism.
Okay.
In the essence, it's a strict social structure that individuals are born into, which heavily regulated various aspects of their lives, including marriage or occupation. To simplify, the hierarchy consisted of several layers. At the highest tier are the Brahmins, traditionally priests, known for their access to education and high purity. Below them, you find the warrior caste, followed by the merchant caste, and then the laborer caste.
Okay.
Towards the bottom of this hierarchy, there existed a group commonly referred to as the untouchables, although they prefer to be called Dalits.
Mm-hmm.
So they were deemed so impure that they were treated as outcast, forced into occupations such as cleaning, street sweeping, and toilet cleaning. They were even barred from using the same well water as members of the other castes.
Okay.
And over time, this system extended its influence beyond India and across South Asia, affecting various religious communities such as Christians and Sikhs. The caste hierarchy was further reinforced during British colonial rule. In the mid-20th century, countries like India and Nepal officially prohibited caste discrimination. However, as we know, simply banning something on paper doesn't necessarily eliminate it in practice, right? So caste remains a significant aspect of people's identity in many places, evident in the privileges they enjoy, their social network, and the opportunities that they can access. This influence persists throughout South Asia.
Well, that's very disturbing that they were called untouchables. But in a similar fashion, I envision that it's akin to how racial prejudice persists in the United States, right? Despite being prohibited by law.
Right.
Just because something is banned by law doesn't necessarily mean that it disappears.
Exactly. And some individuals have made this comparison, like between race and caste discrimination that we talked about, such as journalist Isabel Wickerson authored a widely acclaimed book titled Caste, in which she drew parallels between the caste system in India and how race functions in America. She explored the notion that one can be born into a particular hierarchy, and breaking free from one's circumstances can prove to be an exceptionally challenging thing to do.
So, Ankur, the existence of a bill addressing this caste discrimination in California indicates that lawmakers in the state are of the opinion that this issue is not confined to South Asians only, right?
Correct.
They somehow found that it has somehow found its way in the entire United States.
I do believe we shall end the caste today. We shall end the caste. We shall end the caste. We shall end the
States.
Exactly. So, lawmakers in California have been receiving feedback from their constituents who have been highlighting the growing significance of this issue within this diaspora. To safeguard the residents of California, they believe it's essential to introduce a dedicated bill addressing caste discrimination, with the aim of preventing such discriminatory practices from occurring in the future.
Right. But why is it happening now? After all, people from South Asia have been migrating to California for years, for generations, right?
Right.
So what's prompting the need for this bill at this particular moment to address the issue?
So, Mugdha, the timing of this issue is closely linked to the immigration trends.
Okay.
Following the passage of a significant Immigration Act in 1965, in the United States, there was a substantial influx of people from Asia, including India, to the United States. Many of these newcomers were highly skilled workers with degrees, enabling them to secure jobs in sectors such as technology and healthcare. It's worth noting that a considerable number of these individuals from India who had resources to attain these degrees came from the upper caste. So, Mugdha, for a considerable period, caste discrimination wasn't a prominent issue, or at least wasn't widely acknowledged, because most individuals originated from the same caste. However, this has gradually shifted as the composition of Indian immigrants has evolved over time. This change is largely influenced by shifts occurring within India itself. So in India, there's a system of affirmative action in place, which includes quotas which enable individuals from lower class to access university education and government positions. So the consequence of affirmative action policies are becoming evident, in a sense that these policies enable individuals from lower caste to access university education. And as a result, many of them now possess the qualification required for skilled workers visas to come to the United States. So consequently, the Indian immigrants coming to the US are more diverse. California in particular have witnessed a noticeable transformation due to this shift, especially in Silicon Valley, where a significant number of these immigrants are entering the IT jobs. And this is why the issue is receiving considerable attention and debate in California now.
So, with a much more diverse group of South Asians now settling in places like you mentioned, California, I assume that this increased diversity could potentially lead to more opportunities for conflict upon the arrival, right?
Exactly. So the caste issue gained widespread attention in 2020 when California filed a lawsuit against Cisco, a prominent tech company. In this legal action, an employee In this legal action, an employee hailing from a Dalit background alleged that two of his superiors, who were from upper caste backgrounds, had discriminated against him at work because of his caste. He claimed that they had paid him less and upheld certain opportunities. And he claimed that they had paid him less and withheld certain opportunities from him. The state of California filed the lawsuit on his behalf against Cisco.
Right.
And so this incident triggered a significant conversation in California, unlike anything we had seen before. It happened around the same time as the death of George Floyd, which sparked the Black Lives Movement. Suddenly, individuals were able to articulate their experiences with caste discrimination using the terminologies that resonated with those who understood it in the context of racial discrimination. They were drawing parallels between them. And concepts like systemic discrimination and oppressed communities became more widely understood by the people.
Well, absolutely fascinating. The ongoing conversations in the US following George Floyd's tragic death, which revolves around topics such as race, oppression, systematic racism, is providing individuals, from South Asia, a framework to understand the discrimination that they believe they are encountering in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And they see it as a phenomena which is imported from South Asia.
Correct. And during this period, individuals began to feel more at ease discussing their encounters with caste discrimination prior to the incidents that we have seen in terms of related to racial discrimination. Stories emerge of people facing wage thefts from their upper caste superiors and experiencing social exclusion, where they were denied access to the same cups and plates as their Brahmin employers. I had a conversation with a doctor in California who shared that once other doctors in her city learned about her lower caste background, they stopped referring patients to her practice. And there are various stories where people who immigrated to the US from South Asia have faced caste-based discrimination here.
So, what's the response to this growing awareness of caste discrimination as people are sharing their stories?
Mugdha, so lately more people are realizing that we need stronger protection against treating people unfairly because of their caste. This increased awareness is making different groups of people take action. For example, universities are adjusting rules to stop caste-based unfairness in their anti-unfairness guidelines. Similarly, companies are doing the same by recognizing and dealing with these problems in their rules and actions. A significant milestone was reached earlier this year when Seattle became the first city in the United States to formally ban caste-based discrimination. Additionally, in February of the current year, California State Senator Aisha Wahab, who represents a sizable South Asian constituency, introduced a bill designed to include protections against caste-based discrimination within the state's existing anti-discrimination laws. This legislative initiative underscores a growing dedication to combating discrimination rooted in caste across various brackets of society.
Okay, so what ends up happening to this bill?
One might assume that proposing an anti-discrimination bill in a generally progressive state like California would not spark much controversy, right? However, the reality was quite different as the introduction of the bill led to a significant opposition and ignited a fierce and highly charged battle.
But Ankur, why did this bill arouse resistance? Who ends up being most opposed to it?
So the bill has faced its strongest opposition from individuals within the South Asian diaspora residing in the United States.
Okay.
So these individuals have been exceptionally active in expressing their dissent by attending local council meetings and staging protests at state capitol. Their opposition has been marked by intense anger and passion. So they lay out a few arguments. They say that caste-based discrimination doesn't really exist in the United States. And some individuals argue that caste-based discrimination is not a widespread issue in the United States and does not warrant the passage of a new law. They contend that many South Asian immigrants came to America to escape the traditional caste system and to begin a new free life from those historical constraints, right? So, and they fear that enacting such legislation may inadvertently reintroduce a caste, as a prominent topic of discussion, potentially imposing an identity on them that they no longer actively adhere to or, for that matter, practice.
Right. In fact, some of those opposing the law are essentially arguing that its enactment could reintroduce the concept of caste into their lives in a way that doesn't align with their current experiences.
Exactly.
And they fear that the law might magnify the significance of caste, making it more prominent in their lives than they wish it to be. And this perspective is quite intriguing.
Exactly. And
is.
one of the arguments that you hear most is that this law banning caste discrimination will actually lead to more discrimination, particularly against Hindus.
Why against Hindus?
So the individuals presenting this argument contend that caste is commonly associated with Indians and more significantly with Hindus in the eyes of the average American. Consequently, they believe that this law would primarily target a very specific group of people, unlike broader categories such as gender, race, or sexual orientation, which encompasses a wide range of individuals. This bill would primarily impact a relatively small subset of the population. And critics argue that it could potentially make Hindus, in particular, susceptible to accusations of discrimination.
Okay, so Ankur, when, for example, Hindus oppose this bill, speak out against it, and make this argument that you just made, right? What specific situations are they worried about?
So I can give you an example about that. I read a story about a Hindu professor who teaches at a California university. So, and he expressed his concerns about the potential consequences of this bill. Specifically, he mentioned that his role on the university tenure committee, so which is responsible for deciding whether a person should be granted a tenure or not. Okay. So think of a situation like he evaluates an application for tenure and he rejects it because there are multiple parameters based on which they decide the tenure, right? And with passing of this bill, he is now more exposed to allegations of discrimination compared to his other members in the tenure committee. So he believes that he believes that as a Hindu, he might be more vulnerable to such accusations compared to his colleagues. And he fears that this law would make his job significantly more challenging and limits his ability to engage in activities that are expected of professors.
Okay. So a big argument being made here, it sounds like that in a litigious society, a new law that creates a completely new category of discrimination and protection against it is not without some real-world potential implications and costs.
Right. So these people say that they don't engage in caste discrimination, but that in their everyday decisions, everything from hiring to firing to who they employ or bring it as a tenant, that this will introduce a new level of legal peril and fear and make them worry that they might be open to being sued when there's actually nothing going on.
Yes, it's a valid point to consider. I mean, whether some of the arguments put forth by opponents are genuinely made in good faith or not. Well, these arguments on the surface may seem reasonable, because nobody wants to face new vulnerabilities, right? However, when we look at the broader context of American history, I feel like a pattern emerges. Like throughout history, nearly every anti-discrimination law has faced similar opposition, with arguments suggesting that the problem is just being exaggerated,
right,
and that it's sporadic rather than systematic, or that it might lead to unintended consequences like lawsuits.
Right.
Well, I feel like this pattern isn't unique to the current debate over caste-based discrimination. Like if I can give you an example, there were individuals who resisted laws aimed at protecting women against gender-based discrimination.
Right.
So it's possible that what's happening here is a part of a recurring pattern in the evolution of anti-discrimination legislation, where initial concerns about its impact are raised, but they are ultimately outweighed by the broader societal goals of promoting fairness and equality.
Right. Certainly. And many opponents of this bill appear to be making their argument in a sincere manner. expressing genuine concerns about being unfairly targeted, of the potential for misuse of law against them. They are worried about the unintended consequences this legislation might bring in.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, supporters of the bill argue that the weight of these concerns is overshadowed by the compelling stories and experiences people have shared regarding caste-based discrimination. So they contend that just because some South Asians may not personally encounter or witness caste-based discrimination within their social circle does not negate the reality that it is happening to others,
Right.
or that it might become a pressing issue in the future. Their viewpoint emphasizes the importance of addressing and preventing this form of discrimination, even if it's not immediately apparent to everyone, right?
But of course, one side is poised to win this debate. Governor Newsom, a Democrat, is expected to sign this bill into law. Members of the party have already passed it, and the conflict that you have just laid out here with examples suggests that enforcing it once it becomes law is going to be quite challenging, tricky, I guess.
Indeed, and once this law takes effect and lawsuits starts emerging, American jurors who may not have much, familiarity with the intricate and nuanced nature of caste discrimination, complex ancient concept with deep intersection within various cultures and religions, will find themselves in the position of advocating on this issue.
Right.
So this process reflects the workings of our legal system, where laws are passed, case law is developed, and precedents are gradually established. Proponents of the bill would argue that its purpose is to create a safe space for individuals like people who have suffered discrimination, who have endured caste-based discrimination, to come forward and seek justice without fear. Ultimately, they hope that these legal protections will fulfill the expectations and aspirations of those who migrated to the United States in search of a more equitable and just society.
Well, Ankur, thank you so much for your insightful opinions.
Thank you so much, Mugdha, for discussing this topic. I know that there are a lot of people who might be suffering because of this caste-based discrimination. Hopefully, this bill would help them. And I hope that it's not used as a weapon against people who are currently opposing that.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Thank you so much. California's passage of Senate Bill 403 to ban caste-based discrimination has sparked a contentious debate within the South Asian diaspora. While opponents express concern about potential unintended consequences and argue that caste-based discrimination is not widespread in the United States, supporters emphasize the need to protect those who have experienced caste-based discrimination. The impending enforcement of this law highlights challenges related to comprehension and adjudication of the caste system by American jurors. Nevertheless, proponents view it as a crucial step forward, providing justice and equitable treatment for affected individuals, reflecting a broader historical pattern where initial resistance to anti-discrimination laws eventually yields to a recognition of the need for legal safeguards. As California moves closer to enacting this legislation, it sets a precedent for addressing caste-based discrimination in the United States and underscores the ongoing dialogue about fairness, equality, and social justice. Thank you for listening. I hope to see you next time.